I will explain to you the urinary system. Every day, the kidneys filter nearly 200 liters of fluid from our bloodstream, allowing toxins, metabolic waste, and excess ions to leave the body in urine, while returning needed substances to the blood. The kidneys process about 47 gallons of fluid daily. Less than 1% of this leaves as urine, and the rest goes back to circulation. Because of the huge task of the kidneys, they consume about 25% of all oxygen used by the body at rest. This is the aorta, which supplies oxygen-rich blood from the heart to the renal artery to the kidney. After the kidneys do their job, which later I described, the clean and toxic-free blood, which is also now deoxygenated, goes into the renal vein, then into the inferior vena cava, then back to the heart for more oxygen. The urinary system consists of two kidneys, which consist of nephrons and tubules. The kidneys are fist-sized, bean-shaped organs extending approximately from T12 to L3 of the spine and are at the lower part of the rib cage. The right kidney is crowded by the liver, so it lies slightly lower than the left kidney. From each kidney, there is a ureter, which is like a tube, and the tubes connect to our bladder, which stores urine. From the bladder extends another tube-like structure called the urethra. The urethra extends to the outside of the body. Now let me go back and explain a little further. Inside our kidneys are nephrons. These are the functional units of the kidneys. Each kidney has over 1 million nephrons. There are also thousands of collecting ducts in each kidney, which collects fluid from several nephrons and conveys it to the renal pelvis. Nephrons each have a renal corpuscle and renal tubule. All of the renal corpuscles are in the renal cortex, while the renal tubules begin in the cortex, then pass into the medulla before returning to the cortex. The renal corpuscle consists of a yarn-like ball of capillaries known as the glomerulus. These capillaries have many pores, which allow solute-rich fluid to pass from the blood in the capillaries to the glomerular capsule, also known as Bowman's capsule, which surrounds the glomerulus's exterior like a well-fitted glove. Inside Bowman's capsule are filtration slits, while filtration enters the capsular space of Bowman's capsule. This is part of the filtration membrane, which lies between the blood and Bowman's capsule and allows free passage of water and solutes smaller than the plasma proteins, approximately 3 to 4 nanometers. Sometimes larger substances may get stuck in this filtration system, and special cells called glomerular mesangial cells will engulf them. Plasma proteins are kept in the capillaries of the glomerulus to maintain oncotic pressure, which prevents the loss of all water to the capsular space. Furthermore, this is where the presence of protein or blood cells, which are also too big to pass, in a urine sample usually indicates a problem with the filtration membrane. Now we will move on to the renal tubule of the nephron. Here, tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion occur. Tubular reabsorption is the process of selectively moving substances from the filtrate back into the blood. This reclaims almost everything filtered: glucose, amino acids, and 99% of water, salt, and other components. Anything not reabsorbed becomes urine. Tubular reabsorption is fine-tuned in the distal convoluted tubule by hormones. These hormones are antidiuretic hormone, also known as ADH, aldosterone, and atrial natriuretic peptide, also known as ANP. ADH decreases urine output by making the collecting ducts cells more permeable to water. ADH is secreted by the posterior pituitary gland. Aldosterone's role is to increase blood pressure by enhancing sodium reabsorption and to reduce potassium concentrations. Aldosterone is released by the adrenal gland. ANP does the opposite of aldosterone and reduces sodium reabsorption to decrease blood pressure. ANP is released by cardiac atrial cells when blood pressure is elevated. Tubular secretion selectively moves substances from blood and the filtrate. Tubular secretion is important for disposing of certain substances, such as drugs, that bind to the plasma proteins which are too big to filter, ridding the body of excess potassium and controlling blood pH. Each renal tubule is about 1.5 inches long and has 3 major parts: the proximal convoluted tubule, the nephron loop, also known as loop of Henle, and the distal convoluted tubule. These lead to the collecting duct, which have cells and microvilli responsible for maintaining the body's water and sodium balance, as well as maintaining the acid-base balance of the blood. The collecting duct receives filtrate from many nephrons and deliver urine ultimately to the renal pelvis. Just like in the renal tubule, tubular reabsorption and secretion also happen in the collecting ducts. Now let's talk about GFR, glomerular filtration rate. This is the volume of filtrate formed each minute by the combined activity of all of the glomeruli in the nephrons. GFR is tightly regulated to make filtrate, which maintains extracellular homeostasis, and to maintain constant blood pressure. Blood pressure is maintained by GFR because an increase in GFR increases urine output, which decreases blood volume and therefore blood pressure. On the opposite hand, if the GFR decreases, urine decreases and blood volume and pressure increases. 2 types of controls help to maintain GFR: intrinsic and extrinsic controls. Intrinsic controls include myogenic mechanism, which is a property of the arterial walls of the afferent arterioles, which constricts when stretched and relaxes when not stretched. This helps to control GFR, therefore urine output. Intrinsic controls also include tubulo-glomerular feedback mechanism, which allows certain cells to respond to filtrate sodium chloride concentration when sodium chloride levels increase. When sodium chloride levels increase, the afferent arterioles constrict, reducing GFR, and allows more time for sodium chloride reabsorption. Extrinsic controls of GFR regulation include sympathetic nervous system controls and the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism. With systemic nervous system controls, the whole body's needs are served. An example of this is with hypovolemic shock, as with severe blood loss. It is necessary to divert blood to vital organs, so norepinephrine is released by nerve fibers and causes the afferent arterioles to constrict, thus reducing GFR and brings blood pressure back up. This may damage the kidneys. The renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism is the body's main mechanism for increasing blood pressure. Low blood pressure causes cells in the kidneys to produce renin, and these cells responsible for renin production are stimulated by the sympathetic nervous system, B1 adrenergic receptors, by cells that sense low sodium chloride concentrations, and by the reduced stretch of mean arterial blood pressure. Now I'll explain the formation of concentrated urine. ADH plays a big role in this. When we are overhydrated, ADH decreases and the osmolality of urine decreases. When dehydrated, large amounts of ADH is released, and up to a maximum of 99% of the water in the filtrate may be reabsorbed and returned to the blood. That explains the kidneys and their role in urine production. The urine produced will now be 95% water and 5% solutes, to include urea, uric acid, creatinine, and sodium, potassium, phosphate, and sulfur, as well as calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonate. The urine should be clear and pale to deep yellow, depending on the amount of urochrome or destroyed or destroy hemoglobin. Let's move on to the rest of the urinary system. Moving our way down are the ureters. The ureters convey urine from the kidneys to the bladder. Sometimes calcium, magnesium, or uric acid salts may crystallize in the renal pelvis and form kidney stones, which will make one at risk for bacterial infections and urine retention. These can be shattered by shockwave lithotripsy and later excreted in urine. Drinking enough water to help dilute the urine may help prevent kidney stone formation in people with histories of them. The bladder temporarily stores urine and is very stretchable. The bladder becomes pear-shaped with urine input and is about 5 inches long when moderately filled, and can hold up to 1 liter of urine if needed, but may burst if overextended to its maximum capacity. Rugae help prevent too much pressure by folding and stretching as needed in the bladder. The urethra drains urine from the bladder to the outside of the body. Where the urethra meets the bladder is the internal urethral sphincter, which keeps the urethra closed between voiding to prevent leakage. This is involuntarily controlled by the autonomic nervous system. There is also a voluntarily controlled external urethral sphincter. The urethra is only about 1.5 inches long in females and 8 inches in males. In males, the urethra also carries semen for the reproductive system. Thank you for learning about the urinary system with us.